Empire? They're everywhere. But the world here belongs to the syndicates.
Star Wars Outlaws is due for release later this month, so I thought this would be a good time to look back at two games that a lot of people will use to make many comparisons. And most of us already know how it's going to end. Outlaws will not get as much critical praise as the two Jedi games did, but it will still end up making a lot of money for Ubisoft because the combination of the Star Wars brand and the familiar Ubisoft open world formula has a lot of commercial appeal. Anyway, in this video I will be talking about the two well-received single-player Star Wars games developed by Respawn Entertainment and published by Electronic Arts. This is not a review of either of these games and will feature heavy spoilers including the ending of both games, so watch at your own risk. With that said, let's begin. The first game, Jedi Fallen Order, came out in 2019 at a time when the Star Wars franchise was having a tough time in the video game market. 2017's Star Wars Battlefront 2 received a lot of criticism of its handling of loot boxes, and the game itself didn't really receive a lot of praise. So when Respawn Entertainment, best known till that point for being the creators of Titanfall and Apex Legends, which also came out in 2019, announced that they were bringing out a single-player Star Wars adventure, even non-Star Wars fans sat up and took notice. And early reviews of the game were surprisingly good. It did receive a lot of criticism as well for performance issues, but sadly we are all used to overlooking this aspect of game launches. This is something we'll talk about later in the video as well. Let me quickly speak a little about the story before moving on to other aspects of the game. You play as Cal Kestis, a Jedi whose training was incomplete before being forced into hiding from the Empire. One day his powers are revealed when he is trying to save a friend, and from then onwards he is forced to run from the Empire while simultaneously trying to help a Jedi Knight called Ser find an artifact that contains a list of children who are potential Jedi recruits. The story is not necessarily too strong, but is delivered with a lot of confidence and powered by some truly good voice acting and motion capture work. But for most people, the true reason to play this game is that after a long time, you get to wield a lightsaber in a Star Wars campaign from start to finish. And the lightsaber duels are quite spectacular. The cherry on top is your robot companion BD-1, who is just a wholesome buddy to keep you cheerful throughout your journey. I didn't play the game at launch, but I remember playing Fallen Order when it was first released in EA Play's catalog. I remember losing my way on the first map and then moved on to play something else. Several years later, I reinstalled the game for the sake of this video and gave it another try, and immediately I lost my way yet again. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, I learned how to properly read the holomap, which you need to keep pulling up to find your way. Later, I read that the game's designers meant for players to find their way naturally through the game's environments, and that's why there's no map on the main interface. While this kind of exploratory playstyle certainly appeals to some people, it isn't for everyone. This single feature alone will determine your experience with this game and its sequel, although that one does have a small improvement which we'll talk about later. Jedi Fallen Order is really well made, but it is also a predictable AAA action-adventure game. That means it includes all the elements that you would normally expect from a AAA game. Multiple biomes that are visually different, cinematic set pieces sprinkled throughout the campaign at strategic points so that you don't get too excited or too bored. A large number of secrets hidden throughout the game for those who like collecting everything. Puzzles that will slow you down, sometimes to give you a break from the action and sometimes simply to pad up the game time. And so on and so forth, you get the idea. Putting aside the Star Wars brand for a minute, Playing this game felt like going through a checklist of what AAA games are supposed to have. Things like an underwater level, a prison level, a snowy level. These are some things which we have seen so many times in other games that it doesn't feel that exciting to see them here. However, when you add the layer of Star Wars onto these things, that's when the game starts to feel unique. Sadly, just when you get all of your powers, that's when the game starts to move towards its climax. While I'm not going to show scenes from the ending of the game, I do want to mention that the surprise entrance of Darth Vader, the most well known villain in the franchise, was really well handled. The sheer terror in the room when he suddenly appears and how the characters react signify his strength in the Star Wars universe. Speaking a bit more about the gameplay, while this is an action adventure game, it is also a Metroidvania title, meaning it is designed to encourage exploration. All the levels in the game, featured as different planets, are full of secrets hidden away behind locked doors and sections that can only be accessed once you have certain abilities unlocked. This means the game includes a lot of backtracking. This would have been fine if it was optional, but for those of us who only want to focus on the story and not care about extra unlockables and whatnot, the backtracking is not optional. The most annoying part is when you finish the main objective on a planet and then you're instructed to return to your ship, which is at the start of the map. There is no fast travel system, and you are meant to use the shortcuts which you unlocked on the way in order to return to your ship faster. The intention is that you will explore more of the level on your way back, but this breaks the pacing of the story a lot. And with the poor implementation of the hollow map feature, getting back to the ship can be really confusing and can waste a lot of time exploring wrong directions. But all this frustration is forgiven to an extent due to the presentation of the gameplay. Once you have your powers like push, pull, and double jump, platforming across the maps becomes a delight. And lightsaber combat doesn't ever get boring, even though it is essentially swordplay with a tube light instead of a sword. Later in the game, you get to dual wield, and that immediately makes combat feel fresh and even more exciting. In fact, this is what the game does best. Just when you think you're getting bored of the formula, the game throws something new at you, a new power or a new lightsaber, and the next couple of levels feel fresh. This is why the game, despite its flaws, is easy to recommend to action game fans. Getting used to navigation will take a while, but after that, it's a really enjoyable journey that will keep you occupied for 20 plus hours. Let us now turn our attention to the next game, Jedi Survivor. This came out in 2023, and while it was overshadowed by many other titles like Baldur's Gate 3 or Alan Wake 2, it is still considered to be one of the better titles to come out in that year. However, a lot of the early discussion around this game was once again around technical issues, mostly on the PC platform, where a lot of people simply couldn't get the game to run well on their machines. Even now, after more than a year after release, the Steam reviews sit at a mixed rating, with most of the negative reviews talking about some sort of performance issues. On my Xbox, while I didn't face any serious performance issues, there were two occasions where I had to restart the game because there was a bug that simply didn't allow me to progress. In one case, it was during the tutorial for the blaster where I had to use a charged shot. The game wouldn't register that I was pressing the right button and I could not progress without finishing the tutorial. In another case, I had to use one of BD's skills to move a platform and BD simply would not do anything. These two minor bugs apart, I did not face any issues on console, but I can imagine the sort of issues PC users must have faced at launch, which led to a huge number of negative reviews. That's a shame because behind all the technical issues, Jedi Survivor is a really good sequel. Again, let's quickly talk about the story. Cal Kestis is now a fully trained Jedi Knight, and in this game, his main objective is to reach a mysterious planet called Tanalor, which can serve as a safe refuge from the Empire's forces. Along the way, he meets some old and new friends, explores a few more planets in the galaxy, and indulges in side activities like bounty hunting and gardening. Like any good sequel, Jedi Survivor takes the formula that worked in the first game and adds more stuff to it. For example, we still have the same basic idea of landing on a planet, exploring it to finish some sort of main objective, and then return to your ship to travel to the next planet. What has changed is that you now have more ways to explore the planets, including a grapple and a dash jump. Also, after receiving much criticism for the first game, this game introduces fast travel so that you can return to your ship faster. But at crucial points of the story, you are still forced to manually go back to your ship. When it is actually allowed, the fast travel system is a huge time saver, allowing for smoother progression in the story. The other big issue from the previous game, navigation, is also improved here, although it is more of a band-aid fix than a full solution. The hollow map system is still present, meaning you have to keep pulling up the map, but at least this time you have the option of enabling a navigation assist that tells you where you need to go to progress the main objective. This marker is not always perfect, but for the most part it is very helpful in saving time so that you don't go down a wrong corridor or spend 10 minutes getting lost. The maps themselves are much larger than the previous game, and this means that to fully explore them you need mounts. There are a couple of ground mounts and one gliding mount, but no full flying option. Towards the end, there is also a brief section where you get on a speeder, but that's only as part of the story and not included in the core gameplay. Other changes include having human companions on certain missions, which lets you navigate more efficiently. Bode and Merin are the two companions who can accompany you on some missions. Bode uses his jetpack to fly around and remove obstacles, while Merin uses her magic to conjure portals and remove barriers. And you will need their help when you can get it, because platforming in this game, while still fun, can get a bit challenging at times. Darth Vader makes another appearance, and this time you actually get to fight him, although not as Cal but as Seer, which makes sense because we know Vader has to win for the story to make sense, and the game will end if Cal loses. Since I was playing both games back to back, seeing Vader for the second time didn't surprise me as much as it did in the first game. In fact, it would have been surprising if he had not made an appearance. However, Vader's appearance meant that the actual final boss felt very underwhelming. The final boss, who is none other than Bode, feels like a downgrade after fighting the Darth Vader. On the whole, however, all of the boss fights are quite interesting, with the lightsaber duels once again feeling very satisfying. Apart from your trusty lightsaber, you also get to wield a blaster in this game, although as a secondary weapon. Recently, I reviewed a game called Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn, which uses the exact same combat mechanic. You perform melee attacks to charge up your ranged weapon and then use your ranged weapon for some powerful attacks. I did not know that Jedi Survivor implemented this system in 2023 itself. Now I wonder if there are other games which used similar systems before. Anyway, it is quite intuitive and keeps the focus on the lightsabers so that the game does not turn into a third-person shooter. There's a lot of side content in the game, even more so than the first game, which only had some collectibles as side content. Here there are side quests, an outpost system with various vendors, and other gameplay systems which I did not really invest in, and my story progression was not affected at all by ignoring them. However, this means the game has much more to offer beyond the usual 20-hour story, and for hardcore fans there is a lot more at offer here.
After all we've done, the Empire has only grown stronger.
Having played both games back to back, I think I enjoyed the video game part of these titles rather than the Star Wars part, but I probably would not have been as motivated to play these games without the Star Wars branding. I don't know how much of the story was enjoyed by the hardcore Star Wars community, but I do know that the general reception to the gameplay was excellent. A third game is already in development, and I will certainly be eager to see what else Respawn Entertainment will have to offer. As for the motivation behind playing these games right now, I am not sure how this experience will affect my playthrough of Star Wars Outlaws. That game will not feature a Jedi, so lightsaber duels are out, unless we are suddenly given one as a surprise. And Outlaws will be a Ubisoft open world game, meaning traversing huge maps with a lot of useless collectibles and less focus on platforming and puzzles. The game's development is led by Massive, who made the Division series and also Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, so I do expect a well polished product. But eventually, an open world Star Wars game without a Jedi cannot be directly compared with a more linear Star Wars game with a Jedi as the main character. We'll find out soon enough when Star Wars Outlaws comes out at the end of August. Thanks for watching.